Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon. Oops, sorry, excuse me. Sorry, I had some feedback. Hold on. Hi, everyone. This is Margie Crutchfield. Excuse me, I've got some feedback. I'm going to have to turn that off. Hold on just a minute. All right, I apologize for that. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. I'm Margie Crutchfield, and we're here today to talk about advanced standards. So this is actually a repeat of something I did at the recent CAEP conference. So it's pretty much the same presentation I did there, although I have a little bit more information on a couple of things that I'll include here. I'm very grateful that Deb Eldridge has agreed to be here as well. Because of the large size group, we are anticipating a lot of questions. And so Deb is going to be handling the questions. So if you have any questions, you aren't able to, we're not going to be able to respond to raised hands. So if you have a question, please go ahead and type it into the question field, and Deb will respond to those. If several people ask the same question, she'll just come in and answer that orally. So anyway, she will be handling that, and I'm very grateful that she's here today to help me with that. So I think that's pretty much how we'll do it. I'm going to go over the material that I have in the handout section of this website, of this webinar. I've posted two handouts, the PowerPoint that I'm using, and also a document titled, it's this one, CAEP Standards for Advanced Programs Evidence Sufficiency Guide. The document was posted to the CAEP website right about the time of the CAEP conference. It includes the sufficient level rubric for all of the advanced standards. And that's what I'm going to go over today for each of the components. They are in draft, and so that you still have an opportunity to provide feedback and comments to CAEP staff about those as you like. So there will be hopefully another document on the CAEP website within probably by the middle of November, which will give more information about sufficient evidence and evidence types and things like that. But right now, that's not in a version that they're willing to make public yet, but they're working on it. So, excuse me, I skipped forward a little bit. So anyway, the document that you see here is the available information from the draft rubrics, and that's available to you, as well as a lot of other, there's quite a bit of information on the CAEP website. I'll go over each of those at the end, but that's the newest piece. All right, so just to get started, just want to make sure everybody understands that if your self-study report is due, not when it's submitted, when it's due before September 1st, 2017, you don't include the advanced programs. If it's due after that date, then you do include your advanced programs. So that date has been out for quite a while, so I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. So there are a couple of things around just to make sure we understand some of the policies and procedures that are going to be a little different. There will be one self-study report submitted for both levels. So you'll have one report, and then it'll be broken down in the section for each standard. You'll have one place to respond for your initial and one place to respond for your advanced. But it'll all be in one report form. You will upload evidence data, all of the information that you would put in the evidence room. You will have, this is a change that I didn't know before, but there will be one evidence room, but you'll be able to tag things for initial or for advanced, and they'll increase the number of documents allowed in the evidence room. when people start submitting their advanced programs. You will, in the self-study report, there will be a text box for your narrative to demonstrate how you're meeting the initial standards, and a separate text box for the advanced. So there'll be 2 text boxes. If you get to standard 1, there'll be 2 text boxes, one for initial, one for advanced, and the same for all the standards. So that's how you'll differentiate that. Again, all in the same report. Let's talk about scope, because I think this is a big issue, and I think that this has certainly the scope of advanced programs has been constricted or been reduced. So we'll go over these and then talk about what if you're not sure. I'll talk to you about what to do if you're not sure. So advanced level programs to be submitted for CAEP review include any of the following. If the intent of the advanced program is to develop P-12 teachers or other school professionals for employment in P-12 school districts. Over 50% of the enrollees in the program are teachers or other school professionals in P-12 school districts. Any master's level, EDD, Ph.D. programs specific to preparing people for P-12 school districts. Again, things like reading specialists, school administrators, things like that. So if you can sense a theme here. Also, advanced level programs that are designed to further the knowledge and skills of P-12 teachers and other school professionals, like C&I programs, technology programs, things like that. A difference, if you have track, endorsement, add-on programs, those will just be reviewed under Component 1.1 and only require that you submit evidence of candidate content knowledge documented by their state licensure or other proficiency measures that make sense. So for those, those the small those things that aren't true programs, but they're a track or an add-on or something like that, then you just have to respond to them in 1.1. Okay, ones that will not be reviewed by CAEP. Let's talk about those. Not advanced degree programs specific to content, such as a master's in math or master's in history. Those wouldn't be included. Educational leadership programs not specific to the preparation of other school professionals for P-12 school districts. Again, it's really around who are they, what is the program designed? What role are they designed for? Other advanced level programs, if they're already approved by a national accreditor recognized by CHIA or USD, like CAEP, something like that, it would not be, you would not need to submit it as part of CAEP. There is now, what if you're not sure? If you're not sure whether a program should be included, you've read through the scope doc. There is a more extensive scope document on the CAEP website that goes into this in more detail than I can do as part of a PowerPoint. So if you read through that and you're still not sure whether a program should be included, contact CAEP staff, and I've got an email address in a minute for you to do that. If the program is clearly outside of the scope, you read the scope document and you went, yep, that my program is not in the scope, then you just don't include it. You don't have to ask for a waiver. However, if you have a program that as you read the scope, you go, I think that's included in that. But for this reason, for this particular context, I don't think it should be included as an advanced program. There is a waiver form there's instructions and a waiver form that you can fill out and send to CAEP staff seeking a waiver for that program so that it would not be included in your review. But you only do that when you're pretty sure it appears that it would fit within the scope, but you don't think it should. If you're just not sure, then ask CAEP staff. And if you know for sure it doesn't, everyone would agree that it's not included within the scope, then you don't have to request a waiver. You just don't include it in the program, in the submission. All right, let's move into the advanced standards and talk through those. I do think it's sort of interesting to look at the difference between the number of components for the initial standards and number of components for advanced standards. There's a significant difference. For a time, the advanced standards, had equivalent number of components. They were very parallel. That's no longer true. There has been a significant decrease in the number of components for advanced standards because it was felt they just they weren't relevant. So we're going to go through the ones that are there. There are some general rules, and these are just for all CAEP standards. All components must be addressed. You must have 3 cycles of data. If you have a revised assessment and don't have 3 cycles of data, then you need to provide data from an original assessment so that you show that you have been collecting data. You need to disaggregate data on enrolled candidates for main and branch campuses for technology-based programs, and those other things as listed there. The 3 cycles of data, and when we talk about a cycle of data, we're talking about data each time an assessment is applied. They should be sequential and the latest available. And all assessments, whether at the initial or the advanced level, should be scored at the CAEP sufficient level as defined on the CAEP assessment rubric. And the current version is the one we're using is June right now, and that's on the CAEP website. And as you know, you can submit your EPP created assessments can be submitted to CAEP for early assessment review for a formative review. So that is also available for assessments in advanced programs. There are some required components for advanced programs. We'll get to those: A32, A41, A42, A53, A54. And if you'll see the nomenclature here, A means it's advanced, 3 is standard 3, 2 is component 2. So that's the way the nomenclature is for the advanced standards. Unlike the initial programs, you are not required to have common assessments. You are at the initial level, but there's just so much diversity in advanced programs that you're not required to have common assessments across all advanced programs. You could choose to, but you're not required to. But that also means you are pretty limited in the number of assessments you should submit per program. And CAEP is saying no more than 5. So you can think about that, or what would be the assessments in each program that would provide the best evidence for meeting the standards. All right, I'm going to present the sufficient level from each rubric, and these are still in draft form. And as we read through these and we talk about them, if you say, well, wait a minute, I don't like that, or I don't think that's fair, or whatever, you still have an opportunity to tell CAEP staff, and these are the people that you should talk to. You should email Glenda or Tatiana at either of these addresses and let them know of your concerns. There is still time to make changes to them. And the initial rubrics are also in draft form until the end of 2017. So, but if you specifically have questions about the advanced or you want to make a statement, let Glenda and Tatiana know. There are also people to talk to about scope. These are the folks that you would talk to about scope questions if you have those. All right, so I told you about, okay. All right, so if you're submitting your report in, hold on just a second, sorry, I dropped something. If you're one of the first to submit your self-study report after September 1st, 2017, or in 2018, please, if you have any questions, again, talk to Glenda or Tatiana. They are, if you're in the middle of working on this, you have questions, feel free to contact them. They will help. They've got some working drafts of resources, and they'll be glad to help you and help you sort through what you need to do. So make sure you contact the two of them if you need some extra support or help or have questions. All right. And I always think it's important, just sort of my little soapbox to talk about, is especially when you talk through rubrics, you need to remember that site visitors make decisions based on the preponderance of evidence, not how many bullets they can check off, but in taken all together, all of the evidence for a particular standard. That's how they will make an evaluation of the quality and sufficiency of your evidence. And that's how the Accreditation Council will make a decision on whether a standard is met or not. So just remember that as we go through all of this, okay? All right. Let's start. Standard A.1, Advanced Preparation Content and Pedagogical Knowledge. The provider ensures that candidates for professional specialties develop a deep understanding of the critical concepts and principles of their field of preparation, and by completion are able to use professional specialty practices flexibly to advance the learning of P12 students toward attainment of college and career readiness standards. So Standard 1 has several general rules. And at some point I'm going to quit repeating these because they're the same. Just many of them are the same. You have to disaggregate your data by specialty area for Standard A1, just like you have to do for Initial 1. At least 3 cycles of data. We've already talked about that. And the reported cycles of data must be sequential and the latest available. We know all of that. We've already said that assessments have to be rated at sufficient level. You need to write the self-study around the key concepts of Standard A1, and the components must be addressed as part of the documentation. So you do need to address all of the components, but there are no required components for Standard 1. There's not one that's required over others. So when you present your documentation, your narrative, you need to address all of the components. You need to, when you submit evidence, you need to tag it to Standard 1 so it'll be accessible to reviewers. So that's part of the process of uploading documentation in the evidence room. You tag it for specific components and standards, and you'll be able to do that for the advanced standards as well. All right, so the first component, candidates for advanced preparation demonstrate their proficiencies to understand and apply knowledge and skills appropriate to the professional field of specialization so that learning and development opportunities of P12 are enhanced through. Now there's 6 bullets. There's 3 on this one slide, 3 on the next. Why don't you keep these in your head because we'll talk about them now and later. Application of data literacy. And again, this is appropriate for their area, the particular program's area. Application of data literacy. And that would look different from an administrator than it would for an educational diagnostician or something like that. But application of data literacy. Use of research and understanding of qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methods, research methods. Use of data analysis and evidence to develop supportive school environments. Leading and or participating in collaborative activities with others, like those mentioned here. Supporting appropriate applications of technology for their field, and the application of professional dispositions, laws, policies, code of ethics, and professional standards. Again, all of these appropriate to their field of specialization. So remember those 6 because we'll come back to them. Then evidence of candidate content knowledge appropriate for the professional specialty will be documented by state licensure tests or some other proficiency measure. That's how you'll address the content knowledge. So for the rubric for sufficient says that all of the generic professional skills, that's those 6 that I just talked about, all of those should be addressed, but at least 3 of those are informed for each professional specialty field by multiple indicators or measures that adapt the general skills to a professional specialty field. So you have to address all 3, but all 6, but at least 3 you need to have multiple indicators or measures as appropriate in those assessments. So it's important to think about what each of those 6, how each of those is applied for an advanced program. Okay, you have assessments are sufficient. When you analyze your data for this, you need to include, as you do for all in all our way this in your other standards as well, include identification of trends, patterns, comparisons, or difference. Whatever the data that you provide should support any interpretations, conclusions, or generalizations you make from it. Should make sense. And class average should be at or above the acceptable level on your assessment. So whatever if you're using a particular assessment, most people, the average should be at this acceptable level. All right, so I'm seeing lots of questions that Deb's dealing with, so I'm going to let her deal with those, and unless she has something to say, I'll keep going. All right, A2.
Well, Margie, if you let me speak up to this, yes, it's all about the distinguishing initial from advanced programs. So, for example, in some states, an MED program can be initial licensure or certification.
Right.
In some states, an MED indicates that it's an advanced program. An MAT would be initial certification or licensure. So the key distinguishing factor here is who's enrolled in the program. If they're already certified teachers in some field, any field, biology, and now coming in for initial certification in special education, it is considered an advanced program by CAEP. Not by the SPAs. By the SPAs, they're still considered initial. But if the primary, recipients of the program or the enrolled candidates in the program are already certified teachers, then it is considered an advanced program.
Right. Good. I hope that's clear. I will tell you, as someone who dealt with special ed for a long time, it can get pretty complicated with special ed, as well as some of the others. But yes, absolutely. If the program is designed for candidates who have already been licensed in an area, even if they're adding a new license, for the EPP review, it's an advanced program. Thanks. Then Deb, you just break in anytime you want. All right, a component.
Okay, well, I started recording you, Margie, because you hadn't turned it on.
I did.
It wasn't showing as being turned on, so I went ahead and turned it on.
Huh. Well, mine has been on, but anyway, okay.
Okay, whatever.
Thank you for watching my back. I really appreciate that, Deb. Okay, component A12. Providers ensure that advanced program completers have opportunities to learn and apply specialized content and discipline knowledge contained in approved state and/or national discipline-specific standards. Doesn't this sound a lot like initial standard 1.2? These specialized standards include, but are not limited to, the SPAs, state standards, so on and so on. So, for the sufficient level, general rules are met. A provider presents at least one source of evidence that candidates apply advanced preparation knowledge at specialty area levels. You can, SPA, state reports, other kinds of things that you have. A majority of SPA program reports. Now, these are program reports that you've submitted. This is the same as at the initial level. So, for those program reports that you've submitted through the SPA process, 51% or more of those are national recognition, or documentation is provided on periodic state review of program level outcome data. So you do have information about your state. There are questions that are specific to specialty areas. They are complete and supported by an analysis of accurate interpretation of specialty area data, so that these questions, and I'll show you what they are in a minute, you've answered them, and the interpretations you've made are supported by the data. Provider makes comparisons and identifies trends across specialty areas. All right, think about that. And then assessments submitted for advanced preparation fields under program review with feedback option are at the minimal level of sufficiency. All your assessments should be at the minimal level of sufficiency, hopefully. These are the specialty area questions. These are the same as they are at the initial level. It's basically how are you looking at the data? How have you used that data to improve your program? What have you learned from the data? And so on. So standard A2. We're moving to 2, which is, as we know, the clinical partnerships and practice standard. So provider ensures that effective partnerships and high quality clinical practice are central so that candidates develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions appropriate. So again, this standard 2 is very similar. It's very much focused on the clinical practice, clinical portion of the prep program. And you'll see some very similar language at the initial and at the advanced level. So this is A21, partners, co-construct, mutually beneficial. You've heard these words before. P12 school and community arrangements, including technology-based collaborations for clinical preparation and shared responsibility. Partnerships for clinical preparation. There's a lot of ways to do this, and I think there's probably maybe even be more ways to do this at the advanced level. So it's not the form, it's not the way it's done that's important. It's the how are these partnerships working together and benefiting each other for the improvement of the program. You establish mutually agreeable expectations for candidate entry, preparation, and exit. Sure that theory and practice are linked so that clinical experiences reflect what's happening in classrooms, in the other courses that candidates are taking, that there's coherence across the clinical experiences and the academic components, and that there's a shared accountability for candidate outcomes. As you think about these words, think, these are, the same things that are being expected at the initial level. General rules for A2, I don't think there's anything different here except there are no required components for standard 2. So for A21, general rules for standard A2 are met. You present evidence that P12 schools and EPPs have both benefited from the partnership. So if you think about that, how do you document that this has benefited both? How would you think about doing that? Provider presents evidence that a collaborative process is in place and is reviewed annually. Again, the same thing that you would expect at the initial level. And that you're regularly seeking input from P12 educators with professional responsibilities appropriate for the program area. So you're this active process of building these clinical partnerships. Providers document a shared responsibility that includes these things. These are what you would want to have included in your, as you think about these partnerships, that they're co-construction of instruments and evaluations. Are you working together to develop your instruments and how those are evaluated? Co-constructed clinical experiences, involvement in ongoing decision-making, and input into curriculum development. The EPP supervisor and P12 educators provide feedback to candidates, and so on and so on. So the same sorts of things that you would see. For component A22, moving on to that, provider works with partners to design various varied development clinical settings which allow opportunities for candidates to practice the application of content, knowledge, and skills. So again, you have this series of the kind of clinical practice that allows candidates to practice and gain skill in the knowledge and skills that they need in their profession. Opportunities lead to appropriate, culminating experiences in which candidates demonstrate their proficiencies through problem-based tasks or research that are characteristic of their professional specializations. I think, again, you've got a lot of flexibility in how that could look or how that could work according to the program. At the minimal level, evidence documents that all candidates have active clinical experiences. Particular attributes of varied and developmental settings are investigated in relationship to candidate outcomes. So you're looking at the kinds of clinical experiences they have and their relationship to how the outcome of candidates. Investigations employ both formative and summative assessments in more than one clinical setting. I will tell you that a number of people have raised issue with this, more than one clinical setting. I don't know if that's an issue for you or not, but I just wanted to let you know that's one that CAEP has been getting some feedback on. So if you have concerns about that, I would encourage you to let them know. But the formative and summative assessment use 2 comparison points, use the results to guide preparation and decision making, and modified instruction and clinical experience based on those results. Evidence documents that candidates have used technology, again, not as appropriate to their specialization. And this bullet again has to do with the number of clinical experiences. Evidence documents a sequence of clinical experiences with specific goals that are focused, purposeful, and varied. Clinical experiences are assessed using performance-based criteria, and evidence documents relationship to clinical experiences and coursework. So again, we're talking all of those things that make for the depth and breadth of clinical experiences as appropriate for a particular field. Anything about Standard 2, Deb, that you want to address?
Let me unclick myself. Someone asked a very good question about their online programs where they have candidates that are across the country and the world, in fact, and how would partnerships be demonstrated in that case. So I suggested that, for programs like that, there may not be the level of deep partnership that you could do with someone geographically closer. But perhaps the task would be to represent that geographic complexity, talk about the ways that you work with those sites in terms of placement, in terms of selection, of getting feedback on those sites, providing them with feedback, and perhaps including them on advisory groups or committees that you have existing, either by Skyping them in or whatever.
Great.
But it's a really good question because often those kinds of programs are placing students depending upon their geographic location, okay? So that the sites vary constantly. So I think it is a real challenge to think through, okay, how can we establish high quality partnerships in those places that maybe are one-time placements and not more. So maybe some online opportunities for training, for understanding your EPP and what your goals are for the candidates. Mm-hmm. I think it's a creative solution that we'll all be talking about. More and more programs, EPPs have programs of this kind. So
I agree. Those are all very good suggestions. I've also I don't know what you think about this, but I've also seen in some responses for initial programs that also have wide geographic diverse placements, and at the initial level, they have worked to develop partnerships with a few folks that are more local to where they are, and tried to develop partnerships with folks that they did have access to, and they did place candidates regularly. I think it might be different at the advanced level, but I thought it was an interesting thing to think about. So, okay. All right. Standard A3, candidate quality, recruitment, and selectivity. The provider demonstrates that the quality of advanced programs candidates is a continuing and purposeful part of its responsibility. So I would think that Standard 3 is the monitoring one. Deb, I think I can hear you typing.
Oops, let me mute myself.
Thanks. I know you're answering questions feverishly, so. All right. General rules for A3, I think, are all the same as the others, except that A32 is required. So remember when we get to A32 that it is a required component. A31, provider sets goals and monitors progress for admission and support of high-quality advanced program candidates from a broad range of backgrounds and diverse populations. Admitted pool of candidates reflects the diversity of America's teachers pool, and over time should reflect the diversity of P12 students. Remember that in CAEP, in terms of diversity and reflection of pool. There is understanding that of local context and what diversity and reflection of diversity means in different contexts, different geographical areas. Finally, the provider demonstrates efforts to know and address community, state, national, regional, or needs for school and district staff prepared in advanced fields. So just as in the initial level, this is something you should be doing at the advanced level as well. The sufficient level for 8.3.1, plans for admitted candidate pool provides base points and annual monitoring, including academic ability, diversity, and employment needs. So you need to be collecting that kind of information. The EPP provides disaggregated data on enrolled candidates by relevant demographics, including race, ethnicity, SES, and or sex. So again, collecting data. The EPP shows knowledge of and action that addresses employment opportunities in schools and so on. So again, this knowledge of the market and how that impacts your plans. Last two bullets, the EPP's admission goals and reported enrollment data demonstrate progress from the base point that you've moved towards greater candidate diversity. And evidence documents that the provider monitors influence of employment opportunities on enrollment patterns. So there's some differences here between the initial level and advanced level, but much of the data collection, that kind of thing, is the same. Moving on to 3.2, this is the required one, remember. The provider sets admission requirements for academic achievement, including CAEP minimum criteria, or the state's minimum criteria, or graduate school minimum criteria, whichever is highest, and gathers data to monitor candidates from admission to completion. The provider determines additional criteria intended to ensure the candidates have or develop abilities to complete the program successfully, and arranges appropriate support and counseling for candidates whose progress falls behind. There's a lot in this one. It's not just admission. There's these other things towards the end as well. All right, let's talk about the CAEP minimum criteria. That is, hold on just 1 second. The CAEP minimum criteria are a college grade point average of 3.0 or. Please, I capitalized or, I probably should have bolded it. It's or, 3.0 or a group average performance on nationally normed assessments or substantially equivalent state normed or EPP administered assessments of math, verbal, and written achievement in the top 50% of those assessed. So, at the initial level, it's GPA and the national assessment. At the graduate level, at the advanced level, it's an or, either the 3.0 or the nationally normed assessment. The writing assessment will be implemented in 2021. CAEP minimum criteria apply to the group average of enrolled candidates whose preparation begins during an academic year. So that's how they're looking at the cohort in that sense. EPPs must continuously monitor disaggregated evidence of academic quality for each branch campus, mode of delivery, and individual prep programs, identifying differences, trends, and patterns. So if you have different ways of delivering the programs, you need to be able to demonstrate that you need to be collecting data on those. Here's a sufficient level. EPP specifies its requirements for academic achievement and other criteria it uses at entrance to ensure that enrolled candidates have or develop abilities to complete successfully. So you state what your requirement is for admission. Again, the average score of each admitted cohort should be 3.0 or performance on a nationally normed assessment, as described previously. So again, it's either of those. Those assessments, if you're going to what we're talking about here is candidate performance in math and verbal achievement and beginning later writing. So that's the kind of assessment we're talking about here. You have 3 cycles of data. You disaggregate Look at this, data disaggregated for enrolled candidates by relative demographics, branch campuses, and so on, like we talked about. So for this purpose, you'll be disaggregating that data in that way. And then evidence that you monitor progress and provide support services and counseling for candidates as necessary. So again, a description of those kinds of things that you're providing. A33, again, this is the monitoring. Provider creates criteria for program progression and uses disaggregated data to monitor candidates' advancement from admissions through completion. So when you look at the sufficient level, it says that you'll have 2 or more gates or 2 or more measures or 2 or more points where you are measuring candidate progress. And you should have criteria, therefore, for those points in time so that you have what are the criteria for getting through this point, this gate, this particular thing? What are they? What you need to be explicit about those. Results and stated candidate progressions criteria align with evidence of actions taken. All right, so what have you done based on the kind of data you're collecting? Have you made a change in your curriculum? Have you made a change in your clinical experiences? What kind of interventions do you provide for candidates who are struggling? What kind of support? How do you cancel out? What is your process for monitoring and supporting candidates throughout the program? Component 3.4, this is about completion. So at completion, you're able to document that the candidate has met the expectations for content knowledge in the area and data literacy and all of remember those 6 things we were talking about, that you are able to demonstrate that your candidates have mastered those and met them appropriately. Now, in order to do that, you can just cite the information from 8.1.1, where you have all that data. You can just cross-reference in the self-study back to that. You don't have to repeat everything. You can just cross-reference back to it. Unless there's specific things you want or information you want to make known, then you would include them. But, in general, for this one, you can just refer back to Standard 1, Component 1. Deb, I'll ask you again. I wonder if there's anything about Standard 3 that people are asking.
Okay, it would help if I unmuted myself.
I'm asking you a lot here.
Yeah, Margie, would you just cut that out?
Yeah.
I haven't gotten that far. I'm finding this this GoToWebinar questioning feature very cumbersome.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't show the questions. I have to scroll. It shows only one line at a time of each question. So I'm kind of backed up here.
I think
if I get to anything on Standard 3, I'll let you know.
Okay. I think you can expand the box by drawing it, pulling and dragging it out, but maybe not on your computer. That was my experience before. But anyway, we'll keep going, and we have other questions.
Yeah, it's not working on mine. I've tried and everything I can think of. Okay, bye-bye.
Well, I tell you what, folks, we'll stay online. We'll answer questions, so continue to submit your questions, and we will do the very best we can to get answers done. And I can help too as things go on. So let's move to Standard 4, the fun standard, the one that everybody loves. All right, Standard 4 is satisfaction with preparation, and this is the real big difference between the initial and the advanced standards. At the initial level, you have 4.1 and 4.2, which require you to look at completers' impact on student learning and the effectiveness of their teaching after they're in classrooms, after they've left your program. Those 2 are not part of the advanced standards. They're gone. There's only 2 components in Standard 4, and one has to do with employer satisfaction, and the other one has to do with completer satisfaction. So we'll talk about those one at a time. Let's see. They are required. These components are required Trying to think what else. Cycles, we know about that. Okay. For sufficient level, you provide appropriate information, data, and you analyze that appropriately. You provide a description. You'll have a system for analyzing the employer and completer satisfaction data. You interpret that data. You draw conclusions based on the data. These are typically surveys. The adequate response rate is 20% or more. You provide a description of the representativeness of the sample, data specific to high need schools, to the specialty fields, of course, and comparison points for data if you can, in ways that make the most sense. You can also submit documentation of employment milestones, those candidates who've gotten promoted, who have been retained, have taken over other kinds of responsibilities, and that sort of thing. I'm sorry, I skipped right over 4.1, didn't I? I did. 4.1 is employer satisfaction. I'm sorry, I realized I left out a slide here. I keep looking for it and it's not there. All right. So for 4.1, which is employer satisfaction, you submit evidence that employers perceive their preparation was sufficient. Often this is done by survey, but if you're finding that you're not getting a sufficient number of replies, you can do interviews, you can do focus groups. There's a variety of ways you can do that, and then gather that data and analyze it appropriately and that sort of thing. So again, I'm sorry, I realized I was skipping around a little bit, but that's for employer satisfaction, and that's very similar for completer satisfaction. You demonstrate that advanced program completers perceive their preparation as relevant and that it was effective. So you would submit evidence that completers perceive their preparation was sufficient. You'll take that data, analyze it appropriately, and interpret it, make interpretations based on the data that you have. You need to have an adequate and representative sample. Again, we're talking about 20%. If you're not able to get that kind of rate, you need to think about other ways to collect some of that data, just as we talked about before with interviews, focus groups, things like that. So that's standard 4, which is very different at the advanced level than it is at the initial level. The last standard is about your quality assurance system. And the standard says that you maintain a quality assurance system comprised of valid data from multiple measures. This is exactly the same standard 5 as it is at the initial level. You support continuous improvement, sustained and evidence base. You evaluate the effectiveness of completers. The provider uses the results of inquiry and data collection and so on and so on. I feel like I'm reading a lot here. What I wanted to talk about for standard 5 at the advanced level, the thought is that your quality assurance system is probably pretty much the same, whether it's initial programs or advanced programs, but the process, your system, is likely to be the same. Therefore, you can respond to standard 5 one time and just include information about both the initial and advanced. So you don't have to be redundant when it's the same system. You can just describe it one time. And so, for example, when you're talking about your quality assurance system for component 5.1, your documentation would include measures used at the initial level and used at the initial and the advanced level. When you talk about the quality of data for 5.2, you'd have measures used in advanced preparation as well. So you would just talk about them both at the same time. When you're talking about 5.3, your self-study report would include measures in their use and continuous improvement from both initial and advanced, basically the same thing for 5.5. So the difference is 5.4 because that talks about completer impact. So it would be for for the initial level, you would talk about kind of things you talk about in 4.1, but for the advanced preparation program, we'll talk about that in a minute, the kinds of things you would talk more about, the data that you would have gathered from your completer survey, employer survey, and those sorts of things. But you're not required to go out and evaluate your completer impact on student learning or their effectiveness for advanced programs, okay? If for some reason you want to talk about them separately, they are different, you may certainly do that. If you have no initial programs, you only have advanced programs, then you would just write about your advanced programs in your response for Standard 5. But the hope was that to try to keep you from having to repeat yourself or to write material that's redundant. So you would organize one response to Standard 5 if that made the most sense to you. So again, as I was just talking about, A54 is a little different because there isn't an analogous initial 4.1 at the advanced level. But you would talk about some of those things that you're reporting in the annual report around licensure rates, completion rates, employment rates, and things like that. You could certainly do that for advanced programs. So I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time on this because they're pretty much the same. 3 cycles of data. Assessments have to be scored at we all know that. Components 5.3 and 5.4 are required for the standard to be met. So again, these component A51, this is exactly what's the initial level. Provider's quality assurance system is comprised of multiple measures that can monitor candidate progress, completer achievements, and provider operational effectiveness. Evidence demonstrates that the provider satisfies all CAEP standards. So again, what is your system? How are you doing it? You can describe it one time if that makes the most sense for you, including information about both initial and advanced standards. I really don't feel a great need to go over the sufficient level. It's the same as at the initial level. You're able to disaggregate licensure data by licensure program area. You're able to monitor for operational effectiveness. These are all things that would be required at the initial level, just as they are at the advanced. You have multiple measures that are all valid, all of those things. Now, there is this one piece that's different here in the advanced, that's different from here in the initial, and I think this. I've asked for clarification because that sufficient level advanced programs, it says at least 75% of EPP created assessments used in the system are scored at the minimal level of sufficiency. At the initial level, it says 50%. I'm not sure why it's different, and I don't know if it was part of the conversation I've had with some of the people at CAEP. They're thinking perhaps it's just one of those things that didn't get changed. We'll keep an eye on that, because at this point, all of them should be at the sufficient level. I'm just, the level I would assume would be at the same, whether it's initial or advanced. So that's just one thing to kind of keep an eye on. Documentation that EPP created assessments have established content validity and inter-rater reliability or agreement is at 0.80 or 80%, except for surveys. Okay. Your evidence is relevant, verifiable, representative, cumulative, and actionable, all the same things that you're expected to do at the initial level, and so on. So again, these are things that are very much the same. Component 8.53, you regularly and systematically assess performance against goals and relevant standards, track results over time, test innovations, and the effects of selection criteria on subsequent progress, and use all that information to improve your program. So again, these are the same things at the initial and the advanced level. Let's see. Provider documents it regularly and systematically, reviews your data, identifies patterns, uses data for continuous improvement. Again, this is all part of having a high quality assessment system, quality assurance system. Again, these bullets are the same at the initial as they are at the advanced level, so I'm going to move on. And we talked about 5.4, so I'm going to move on with that as well. And 5.5 is the last one. And that's using stakeholder involvement in the development of your quality assurance system. So, all right, those are all the standards. I'm sure you've had lots of questions, and we'll get to them as we can. But I do want you to know the phase-in schedule. There is a phase-in schedule on the CAEP website, so you can go back and look at it. It's got more information than we have here. But it says advanced standards are first included in after September 1st, 2017 and on to 18. And in that year, in the 2017-2018 academic year, the following 2018-2019, plans may be submitted in lieu of actual data. So if you are, if you need to submit a plan to address how you're going to address some of these components, you can do that, but you need to look closely at the guidelines for plans in it's on the CAEP website. Appendix E is in the handbook, but it's the same document on the website as in the handbook. It's on plans and how they were used as evidence and what needs to be in a plan and how they'll be evaluated. So you can have plans, but you need to make sure you are providing all the information expected in a plan. Then during these next 2 years, you can still have plans, but you are expected to have started making progress, that you're not still just planning at that point in time, but that you are actually taking steps to implement pilots or do the things that you need to do. So it's not just that a plan, you have plan plus progress. And then in academic year 21-22, phase-in is over. You should have everything in place by then. Okay. So these are the resources on the website. They're the standards. There is a document that summarizes the changes. There's a document that summarizes policy changes. There's the phase-in policy that I was talking about. There's a document about the scope. And then if you want to request a waiver or an exclusion of a program, there's an instructions there and a form. So all of that has been and is on the CAEP website under advanced standards. If you click on standards, then advanced, that's where you'll find all these things. So, Deb, is there any particular question you want to address at this point, or?
Typing away here.
I think you've had a harder job today.
Margie, don't make me laugh. I'm not sure it's a harder job, but I do think it's been challenging to try to get to all the questions in a timely manner. The current question I'm answering is, since advanced programs can use different assessments, am I right in assuming we will not need to submit aggregated data? And I'm saying, well, you might try aggregating for the 6 bullets in A11, which all programs must address.
Okay,
Because that's data literacy and collaboration, and you must address 3 of those 6 bullets. It may not be the same assessments that you're using, but there may be the similar or aligned rubric lines that relate to those bullets. What are your thoughts, Margie?
Well, I think if you can do that in a way where you have data that makes sense of course, data that makes sense to, if you're able to aggregate it or disaggregate it. But I think that's going to be a real difference in the way data is presented. You will need to disaggregate it for the program areas, but again, I guess it just where if you have data that you can make sense and is appropriate to show those things all together, then I do it. I mean, it would make sense, but I think it's going to be different for advanced programs. I do think that is one of the big differences.
Okay, so maybe we should deal with some of these questions just by reading them as they're coming up, and we can address them that way.
Okay.
Can you clarify if candidates need a field experience or what that might look like if they don't have access to a classroom? I believe CAEP states flexibility, but this has been a point of discussion since NCAEP days.
Well,
And I would say that the CAEP standards require that there be clinical practice of some kind for advanced programs. And if they're certified teachers, they should have classroom access.
I would
It's
agree.
usually done in their own classrooms.
Right. I think standard 2 is very clear at the advanced level that there should be some clinical experiences. And if you have a particular program and you go, wait a minute, that's just not going to work, I think you need to let CAEP know about your concern. But I agree, Deb, the standard's real clear to me.
And some things that people have done is to find the flexibility. Let's say that there is a case where it is a certified teacher who is currently not teaching for whatever reasons and is pursuing an advanced program. Often people have accessed their own children's classrooms. People have accessed after-school programs. People could contribute to online sites. I know that Pennsylvania has a complete program for P12 students that is offered online. And there might be other settings that would be appropriate for an advanced placement, of course, depending on the program that the candidates are enrolled in.
Right. I'm going to answer a question here. It says, if assessments are approved by the SPAs, do we have to resubmit them for approval by CAEP?
Yeah, I already answered that one, but answer out loud.
Want me to answer it too?
Yes, answer it too. Let's see if we're in harmony.
I can't tell what you've answered and what you haven't, so I'm going to let you be in charge at least. The answer is yes, because SPAs aren't required to use the CAEP instrument rubric. They can choose to use it, but they're not required to. So, yes, you do need to submit them. You don't have to submit them for approval by CAEP. You can volunteer to do that. That's a choice you make, but they will be reviewed using the CAEP assessment rubric. They're not waived for review by the site team just because they've been approved by the SPAs. Is that what you said, Deb?
Wait, let me unmute. Put it this way, even if they've been approved by the SPAs, the site visitors are going to review them.
That's right.
And you must submit them if it's an EPP created assessment as part of the review. So it's going to be reviewed. Absolutely.
Right.
For early assessment of instruments, what is the timetable? The timetable right now is that there is a rolling admissions here for early instrument review. For some reason, I've heard people saying that they had to be submitted on March 30th or something. I know nothing about that. And I'm actually the person that's running the early assessment review right now for CAEP. So there is no deadline. You can submit at any time. We just finished training over 100 assessment reviewers. So the timetable is if you submit now, you should have your results within 2 months at the outside. If you don't, you just need to email to see what the hang-up is. And we have had some assessments assigned where an assessment reviewer, got very, very sick and didn't pursue the review. So it's just a matter of reaching out to us and we'll get it done in a very timely manner. I'm clicking through some questions here, Margie.
Okay, I'm going to let you do that.
Okay, thanks for the information. Where do we get a copy of the presentation? And can we get a transcript of the questions and answers? Margie, that's a you question.
Okay, well, you have access to the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint you have access to right now. It's posted in the handbook, the handout section. This webinar will be posted on the CAEP website and on the YouTube CAEP YouTube channel. If you haven't looked at the CAEP YouTube channel, if you just go to YouTube and type in the whole name, not the acronym, but Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation. You'll get the channel, and all of the CAEP webinars are there. It'll be posted there. I'm really going to work hard to get a transcript of the questions. I know that there's a way to do it. I've been told how to do
There
it,
is.
and I hope.
Yep.
Can you do it?
I can do it in another format, yes. Usually on GoToMeeting when it has the, but I don't know in the event site, because usually it gives me a transcript of the chats,
Yeah.
which I then go ahead and publish. So let's hope it'll be there. We had a couple of questions here about Margie. Two questions about how to collect SES data on candidates. One person saying that it seems a bit intrusive. Usually this is a part of, just generalized admissions applications, and there's always an opt-out question where, I choose not to report. And so, maybe you want to pursue the inclusion of a response like that so that, candidates that do feel sensitive about this and are not willing to provide information have the opportunity to choose not to do so.
And I do think you do the best that you can. I do think that as well. Okay.
Another question says it's challenging for online master's programs to assess candidate dispositions. Is there any resource or sources out there that may help with this issue? I do not know of any resources. I do know that there was someone from Western Governors University who presented at the CAEP Conference on dispositions and following up on dispositions, and all of those are online. And so you might try downloading her PowerPoint, which does have her contact information, and can reach out to her. I know that she would truly enjoy collaborating with others on this important work. And according to my thingy here, I think we've gotten all the answers out there. Oh, here's a new question. When will you get access to your self-study report? My report will not be due until spring 2018, based on our visit in spring 19, but we'd like access now. Can I request this in Ames or via email? Usually the staff will upload the template for you to begin 18 months in advance, or a year and a half in advance of your self-study. Margie, do you know if they'll upload it earlier if requested? I tried to request it and was told no.
Well, I think they usually like it about a year in advance of submission. I mean, you can certainly ask. I would ask. You asked Richard, Deb, or Cole?
Cole is the one who usually does this.
Yeah. All right, Cole Bowers. I don't have a way. It's COLE.BOWERS. I don't have a way to type you a message. It's COLE.BOWERS at capenet.org.
Cole.Bowers. Here's a question I haven't gotten before. What if the certified teacher is actually an international candidate who has international licensure but not U.S. licensure? I think they're still certified teachers. What do you think, Margie?
I think so too, but I think in order to, if we're talking about someone in the U.S., I mean, the state would have determined whether or not they could teach. But I assume you're saying the settings, you mean entry into the program, the certified teacher, that has to do with program scope? Was that the question?
I don't know. That's what it says. What if the certified teacher is actually an international candidate who has international licensure but not U.S. licensure? I think that that's still considered a licensed teacher in that one example. I don't think that would determine whether or not the program is advanced or not.
Right.
I think that's an EPP decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Still clicking through here.
Okay, your question. There was a question about A2, and if advanced program does not have an internship or clinical practice, can we ask for an exclusion of it? The reason you would ask for a waiver is because it doesn't address the scope, the CAPE scope. So not whether or not it has a clinical experience. I think if you have a program that you feel fits within the scope of CAPE but doesn't have, and there's a good reason why it doesn't have a clinical experience, I would send that question to the CAPE staff that I told you before, Tatiana or Glenda, and ask them about how Standard 2 would apply to that program. I think this is a lot of this is just going to come up now that there are rubrics, now that there are policies. A lot of these questions are going to come up about, well, where does this fit and where does that fit? And right now, we don't know 100% of the answers, but Kate needs to know that that question is there and needs to make sure that an appropriate answer is defined. So.
I got a question about the phase-in stage. If we're in the phase-in stage, can we submit plans and data or just stick to plans? You're beyond the point, I think, now where you can submit just plans. You must submit plans and progress in implementing those plans.
Well, Deb, I'm sorry. I think you.
Or is that for just advanced programs?
That's for initial programs. For advanced programs, they can have plans this year and next year. But if you already have progress, go ahead and report it. Don't not report data just because you're not required to. If that's where you are right now, go ahead and report your plan and your progress so far.
Even doctoral level programs require a clinical component. I don't think there's wiggle room. The standard doesn't allow exclusions for that, does it?
No, not if it's, and I think my doctoral program had a clinical component. I think a lot of them do, a practicum of some sort. Doesn't have to be a teacher, teaching in a classroom, but something appropriate, practical experience appropriate for that particular profession, for that area.
Okay.
The definition of clinical experience, parameters, descriptions, clarifications, I would go and look at the information for Standard 2 at the advanced level. There will be more information provided by CAEP in the coming weeks around this. But again, you go look at the glossary, you go look at all the information, you look at all those sorts of things. If you still have questions, you can ask me or Deb, or you can ask the folks at CAEP as well.
Yep. I'm definitely, before I do this again, I'm going to find out how to make these questions show up in full.
Yeah, it worked well when I had two screens. I could do it that way. Okay, our state does not require an internship or clinical observation for endorsement, but we have embedded the clinical evaluation and observations in the course of this part. Is that sufficient? It sounds sufficient. Yes. To get an endorsement, you really only have to, if it meets the requirements in Standard 1 for a track or endorsement only, you only have to provide data around there as described in that for 1.1. So.
Now it said here that there's another question. You said earlier that candidates could do their clinical practice in their own classrooms. Is there any requirement that candidates have clinical practice in other environments? And the answer to that is yes, because the CAEP standard does say in more than one clinical setting, right, Margie?
That's right. It says you have to do an assessment in more than one setting. And then it says that the next bullet, or the next second bullet, says a sequence of clinical experiences. So again, that to me says at least two. So.
Yep. But I will say that there are a number of deans and others who are writing to CAEP about that particular point.
Right. And so I would, if that's a concern for you, please add your voice to that.
Add your voice, absolutely. So did you answer the one about the state does not require internship? but we embedded clinical evaluation and observations in a course that is required.
I tried.
This is for, huh?
I tried to answer that one.
Yeah, okay. I was busy scrolling through questions, so thank you. Okay.
This is so strange. I cannot see your answers.
I know, and it's a shame. I can't either. And somebody did say, as a side note, she was able to copy and paste the Q&A into her own document.
I did get it. Now I got it. I don't know how to copy it, but we'll figure that out. Let's see. Let me see if there's other questions down here at the bottom. Oh, the endorsement was built in.
Okay, you do that. Hallelujah.
Oh man, I can't. This is this cumbersome system. What about a PhD program where the person may or may not have the intention to return to K-12 practice? Does this require a clinical component? If the PhD program is included under the scope, and it's not candidate intention necessarily, it's what the program is designed to do. If it's a PhD in school administration and they don't decide to be a school administrator, that's not the point. The program is designed to prepare people to be school administrators. So if it fits within the scope, then they have to meet standard 2. So if this PhD program fits within the scope of programs, then for advanced preparation, then it should have a clinical component as appropriate to the program. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that. It doesn't necessarily mean in a classroom. It depends on what they're being prepared for. Okay. All right. Here's one. Did you answer? If a licensed teacher in multiple subjects, so they have their license, they want to add ESOL through an online program, then they only have to respond to 1.1.
And I said yes, because it's an endorsement.
Okay. All right. Yes. Now, I would also say you might need to, if you're a SPA state, you may need to look at what the expectations are for the SPA. That might be different. Okay.
All right, Margie, unless we have some questions coming across the board, I think we've answered all of them that I can see right now.
Okay. I am so impressed that other people were able to copy and paste, because I've still not been able to do it. Okay, but I'm sure I can. I'll figure it out. All right. Okay, folks. Well, I'm not gonna. What we'll do is we'll turn off the recording. Deb and I will stay on for a few more minutes just to see if other questions come up. I do appreciate your being here. There were an awful lot of you on this webinar today. Please, any issues or concerns that you have, you can tell them to me, but you can also send them directly to CAEP. So feel free to do that as well. So thanks a lot. And as I said, we'll stay on for a few minutes just in case. But I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off now. Thanks a lot, folks.